Okay, there we go. We have the recording on. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer. Thank you for coming on Saturday morning. Really happy to see you. So I am the leader for this workshop. I teach at Portland Community College. So I noticed that in this group, there's quite a few people from Portland, Salem. So hopefully you are familiar with that. And I teach all levels, but I primarily teach, well, I most often teach low intermediates or intermediates, but sometimes I also teach beginners. So that's a little bit about me. I've been there for a long time, a little over 20 years. So I'd like to just know a little bit about you. So I'm going to put some questions in the chat for you. And let me just see if I can get that sent to the chat. There we go. So what is your name? Are you tutoring currently? If yes, where are you tutoring and what level of students do you usually work with? And then also it's kind of interesting to know, are you working in person or on Zoom? Oh, so Gina, you are teaching on Zoom. Okay. Yeah. So most of the activities that we are going to talk about today can be done on Zoom, but well, all of them can be done in person and most of them on Zoom. Not all, some of them are very tricky to put onto Zoom, but most of them can go. So I see, oh, three of you are from Beaverton Literacy. Oh, and then also Caroline from Clackamas. Good. And Carolyn is in Salem, I know, in person. Okay. Oh, so Caroline, you actually are working with fairly high level students. So the focus in terms of the examples, most of the examples will be beginning up to low intermediate or intermediate, but a lot of them are adaptable up in level. But I just chose examples from lower levels. Okay, thank you for all of that. So let me just close the chat for a moment. Okay. All right, well, let me share my slides with you. So oops, there we go. Can you see my screen now? Okay. So we're going to focus on grammar, and we're really thinking about how you as tutors or teachers can present grammar practice that leads to communication. So communicative grammar practice. And the level is targeted at beginning into intermediate, but as I said, a lot of it can be adapted upwards. So this is the workshop website, which maybe some of you looked at, some of you didn't. This is going to be available to you for quite a long time if you are interested in looking at it again. On the top here, we have the beginning and intermediate grammar topics. That's a handout, which we'll talk about during the workshop. On the right side is a class evaluation, which I'll ask you to fill out at the end. And then after we finish, I will post the slides, and then I will also post the recording. And the recording takes a little bit longer to upload, but I will post it probably within the hour or two after our workshop. The recording is available to you for, I think, about a month before it gets auto-deleted. But this website and all the other things are available longer. I also put together a list of resources for you down here, and you can come back to this later if you are interested. And then if anything comes up during our session together, suggestions from you or questions from you, I can also add that to this website. So you can come back and use this as a resource. Okay. So I'm going to go over to our slides. Oh, we have a question in the chat. I am very, very happy to answer questions in the chat, but I don't always see it. Oops, I teach low beginner students. Okay, great. We have examples for low beginners too. And you're from Tacoma. Wonderful. It's always nice to have Tacoma people join us. Okay. If I'll try and monitor the chat, but if I miss it, please just flag me down. So, okay. So I'm going to go over to our slides. Oops. Got to get back. Here we go. I have them all open. I want to get back to the beginning. Okay. So when I was thinking about how to frame a workshop about grammar, I decided to go with this kind of idea of knowing versus doing. And I don't know if any of you have ever searched that on the internet. It's kind of interesting. If you do search it, you'll see there's lots of different slides with knowing versus doing. So maybe this is a concept from business. I'm not sure. Anyway, but we're going to use this as kind of a frame for what we are going to do. We're going to start with the knowing, and we're going to think about your knowledge base. And then we're going to think about the doing. How do you, what strategies can you use to teach grammar? And then lots of practice activities, examples of practice activities. And we're also going to think about how to apply this to the students. So we have knowing versus doing. So we start with our knowledge base, but we really want to cross the bridge and do. I mean, we really want to, it's all about the doing. It's not as much about the knowing. So the plan is we're going to talk about the knowing side for a little bit. We'll talk about how people learn languages. For some of you, this will be review. For some of you, this might present a few new ideas. And then we'll talk about what do you need to know about grammar. And then we're going to do the second part will be about the doing. We'll talk about strategies for setting up activities with learners and lots of examples of different kinds of activities you can use. So we'll start on the knowing side. We'll talk a little bit about how people learn languages. So we're back on this slide with knowing versus doing. A lot of times when we think about school, we think about what we know, but when we teach a language, we really want students to use the language and be able to move to the doing side. And one reason I chose this kind of framework is because this maps really well onto a linguistic idea about language learning, which is learning versus acquisition. Probably some of you have taken PLC's basic tutor training before, and when we're in our basic tutor training, we talk about learning versus acquisition. So when we talk about learning and acquisition in terms of language learning and linguistics, learning is thought of as a conscious process. We think about it, it's not automatic. There's a lot of focus on form. So how do we make our grammar structures? And learning produces a lot of knowledge. But of course, we want our students to use it. So acquisition is when they've acquired the language, they can use it as an unconscious process. It's the basis of communication. We want to produce the ability to communicate. So that's our goal, to get across that bridge, and particularly to produce the ability. So one thing about this model, the learning versus acquisition, the way this comes up is because there's a lot of influential people who wrote about we should all learn language through acquisition because that's the way children learn language. It's the natural way. So when we say acquisition, it's just like it comes in and you're absorbing it. And that's the natural way that children learn language. Because of this natural way, and also just because of kind of a bias sometimes in linguistics, sometimes learning gets discounted, and sometimes it even gets disparaged. And sometimes people use words like unnatural, artificial, but that's not fair because adults are no longer children. We're not children. We don't have children's brains. We have adult brains. So here's an example. So, yes, adults can acquire language naturally without formal learning and even become very fluent. Just like this guy can use that computer on that table and chair. Yes, it's possible. But just like the table and the chair are not a good fit for this adult, unaided natural acquisition doesn't fit adults in quite the same way that it fits children because our brains are different. So when we think about adult language acquisition, can adults learn a new language through natural acquisition? You know, just being in the community, just listening, just hearing, just speaking. Yes, absolutely. Adults can learn in this way. And many in our community do that. And over time, they become very fluent. However, you will run into some common characteristics of adults who have learned through natural acquisition. And I know that I was emailing with one of you about this. Um, Learners' grammar has structures of varying levels of complexity because they're hearing it all. So they might use beginning grammar and they might be use very high level grammar, and some of it they use really well, and some of it they don't use very well. So their accuracy can be all over the place. And then the other thing that happens, and I was emailing with one of you about this, some learners develop fossilized errors. And what that means is they're learning naturally, and they're not seeing it, reading it, practicing it in a formal way. And so they're making their own set of rules in their brain, and they're developing patterns and habits. And that's why sometimes, for example, a learner might not hear, I am working at Fred Meyer. They might not hear am because we usually say I'm, and they don't hear that M. So that's why you'll hear learners all the time, I working at Fred Meyer, or I am worked yesterday. They are not hearing it and they develop those patterns. So um, if they do that, it's very hard to work out of the system because it's very ingrained as a habit, and it's very challenging to help them uh, change those habits. So those are some of the characteristics of adults who learn from natural acquisition. But typically, adult learners really benefit from using natural acquisition, what they hear, but also from explicit instruction. So for adult learners, there's a lot of benefits to incorporating explicit learning and explicit instruction. Research shows that adult learners, when I say learners now, from here on out, it's going to always be adult learners because I don't think any of us are working with children. Research shows that adult learners benefit from direct instruction and study. Explicit learning helps learners build a more accurate mental model that the brain can use to organize language information. Because what's happening when they're doing natural learning, they're making rules in their head all the time. How does this work? What do I need to say? And sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's not. So explicit instruction helps with that. And then also, I think that it builds learners' confidence. When I have worked with students who've been living here for 15 or 20 years but haven't gone to school, they speak very fluently, but they often have a lot of concern or lack of confidence about their ability with the language. They're worried about it. And so engaging in explicit instruction does help them feel more confident many times. So to make explicit learning more useful, when we work with learners, we want to help them make those rules in their head, but language is more than rules. So our goal is to minimize explanation and maximize practice. We don't want to stay too long on the knowing side. We want to help students cross the bridge to doing and using the language. So I'm going to talk now, we're going to move into a section about what do you need to know about grammar. But I just want to say at any time, if you have a question or a comment, please just stop me because I can just rattle on. And I'd rather if you had something on your mind, if you would just chip in and say so. So we're going to talk a little bit about grammar now. So this is not, we're thinking about this from the point of view of teaching. What do you teach? What do you need to know about what you teach? I'm not going to teach you grammar. We're going to talk about things that you might need to know when you are teaching. So what do you need to know? Here is the short answer. You say, what should I teach my students? Well, the short answer is a good textbook is your friend. And we could just say that and stop right now with this section, because if you have a good textbook, it's going to guide you, it's going to sequence grammar for you, it's going to show explanations in a way that's simple and appropriate for your students if you have a textbook that's on the right level. So you can use student textbooks. This is an example of 3 common series. There's others, English in Action, Future Ventures. All of them are very thoughtful, well-written, and they all respond to standards across the country for English language instruction. So you can use these with your students. And if you want to learn grammar, you could even get a book a level up to give you a little bit more context for teaching. And then if you want a reference grammar, I always recommend some of these. I particularly like the Azar, which is the author is Betty Azar. She wrote a series of 3 textbooks. The red textbook is a beginning, the black one is intermediate, and then there's a blue one, which is advanced. And she does have a lot of practice activities in her books, but I think they're, and sometimes I get ideas from them, but really it's most useful as a reference, because she has these very detailed charts of how different structures and rules work. So when I have a question, sometimes I go and look in her books or other references. So that's the short answer. Now here's the longer answer. But first, we're going to just do a little quiz just for fun. So I'm going to stop my share. Let's see if I can do that. And I'm going to launch a little survey. I'm going to ask you some questions about grammar, just for fun, to see what you might know. Oops. Okay, I checked yesterday. Let's see, Grammar for English Language Teachers by Martin Parrott is also really good. Yes, there's other really good surveys. Oh, good grief. Okay, I checked my survey yesterday, but it's not showing up in the meeting. So I think I don't want to spend a lot of time just going around looking for it while you're sitting here. Okay, well, I'm going to go back and share my slides and tell you the answers. So we'll pretend this is a quiz. So the first question on this quiz that you're not doing is word order. And so what is the word order in sentences in English? So we're thinking about subjects, verbs, and objects. And I'm giving it away because I wrote subject and then I wrote verb and then I wrote object. So that's the answer. English is a subject, verb, object language. And so here's some information about word order. Some languages, such as Latin, have the flexibility to change word order, although they might have a default that they prefer. About 40% of languages in the world, including Japanese, Korean, Tamil, and Turkish, are SOV languages, so they have subject, object, verb. About 35% of languages, so almost as many, including English, Romance languages, Chinese, and Swahili, are SVO languages. They have a sentence pattern of subject, verb, object. And about 7% of languages, including Classical Arabic and Hawaiian, are VSO languages. So sometimes some students kind of get their word order kind of mixed up, and it could be interference from their first language. So if you ever work with Japanese or Korean students, for example, they might have a subject, object, verb preference. Okay, so the next question on our quiz, our poll, present simple versus simple past. What do we use the most in English? Do we use simple present more or simple past more? It actually depends on the context. So in spoken English, we have a strong preference for simple present. In fiction, not surprisingly, strong preference for simple past. And in news or journalism, it's about even, a split between simple present and simple past, and slightly more present tense. And then this one is kind of interesting, simple present versus present progressive. So simple present is like I swim every day, and present progressive is I am swimming right now. Okay. I study, I do my homework every day. I am doing my homework right now. So one thing about textbooks, which are your friends, but some textbooks like to put present progressive way up front, but actually we use simple present far, far, far more than we use present progressive. In fact, about 90% of verbs in English are simple tense verbs, present or past, rather than progressive, like I am swimming, or perfect verbs, like I have swum every day this week. So that's something to think about when you're teaching, especially in the lower levels. As you go up in level, you start to incorporate more and more and more verb tenses. But in the beginning, it's quite important to make sure students are working with present and past verbs because those are the verbs that are most common. Okay, so we are going to just do an overview of beginning and intermediate grammar. And a couple years ago, I tried to kind of condense this into a one-page handout. So because it's one page, it's not perfect. It's also thinking about it from a teaching point of view, not from a linguistic point of view. But we're just going to walk through this. And as we go through this, please tell me if you have questions or comments from your own experience and what you've noticed when you're working with your students. So we just talked about sentence patterns and sentence structures, and we said that English is an SVO language. Of course, we can also make sentences with just SV, subject, verb, but if we have an object, it will be after the verb. That's really important to us in English, so it's really, really important for students to kind of get that feeling. For example, if we say a dog bit a man, that has a completely different meaning than if we say a man bit a dog. If we change the word order, we've really changed the meaning drastically. So the next part of this chart is talking about verbs. And when we talk about verbs, I'm just get my little pointer out. When we talk about verbs, I like to think about it in terms of simple tenses, compound tenses, and modals. So simple tenses, that would be simple present and simple past. And when we're looking at simple present and simple past, there's always the base verb is a one word. So when we have a positive sentence, there's just one word. And that's contrasted with compound tenses. When we make a compound tense, we have to have two words to make it. So that's why it's compound. When we are thinking about simple tenses, it's important to be thinking about be verbs. And I call them action. With students, I say action verbs. I just to have something to say. So be verbs and all other verbs in the English language, they are distinct. Be verbs have their own set of rules. So be verbs am, is, are, there is, there are, and then in the past was, were, there was, there were. And they have their own rules for how to make negatives and questions. And then action verbs have their own rules. And when we do questions and negatives, we needed to have a helping verb, a do helping verb. So that's really an important distinction for learners. And if they aren't starting to gradually kind of make those rules or get that systematized in their head, that's when we'll hear things like I am watch, I was ran. We start to hear those things because they're not distinguishing the rules for be verbs and action verbs. And then also, of course, the form, we have watch, and then for he, she, it, we have watches. And then in the past, we have the regular, and then we have the irregular forms. And so, unfortunately, for the irregular forms, there's a lot of memory work that students need to do for that, but not as much as in French or Spanish, I just want to say. If any of you done French or Spanish, you know This is a small list compared to French and Spanish. So then we have the compound tenses. We have to have two words to make it. So I am watching. And then another common compound tense that we'll teach in beginning and low intermediate is future. And for some reason, we have two future forms in English, be going to plus verb and will plus verb. And then, of course, we can also make the future in other ways, like tomorrow the class starts, simple present, at 9 a.m. So that's kind of confusing. But for low-level learners, you don't have to drill down that deep. That just can be confusing. That's something you might start doing at intermediate levels. And then I know that in this workshop, some of you are already teaching intermediate or advanced. So there's other compound tenses that we teach in higher levels, like past progressive, present perfect, past perfect. Then we can get into passive voice and some other ones also. And then modals. Modals are also compound. Technically, from a linguistic point of view, they are not tenses, but in terms of forming them, they are also compound. So for example, we want to talk ability, we use the helping verb can plus the base verb can walk, can talk, can see, like that. So when we teach verbs, then we also are thinking about some other things that are factors in teaching verbs. What order do you teach the verbs in? So when they are out in the community and they're naturally acquiring, they'll hear all of them. And that's fine. And they'll have knowledge about many of them, and that's fine too. But in terms of how you want to work on them with students in class, how are you going to sequence them? And again, a good textbook will give you a good idea. But my personal opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth, my personal opinion is that we should delay present progressive until they have a little bit of control with simple present, and maybe also simple past. I'm going to just pause because I see some things coming up in the chat, which I did not see until now. Okay, so yeah. So Caroline says also acquisition as a sole method doesn't work so well for the hearing impaired. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, especially because if they are ASL speakers, because ASL has a different grammar than English. They do not have the same grammar systems, and the same for students with learning disabilities. And also, I'm going to add to students with learning disabilities, also literacy students. Students with learning disabilities and literacy students, they just need a lot of repetition and a lot of practice. Caroline says she uses Azar's chart book. Yeah, it's wonderful. I like that too. I'm yeah.
I sometimes have students
Absolutely.
who buy the
Huh?
chart book because it doesn't have all the practice in it. It's just a reference book.
Yeah, I like that. And then they can carry it with them across levels.
Right.
So
It weighs a lot less.
it weighs less, it costs less. So
Hmm.
I actually like it too. I almost used it for a textbook this term. However, then I looked at the price, and so at PCC, each class, the teacher chooses the book, and the next level might not use the chart book again. It could still be useful to students, but then they'd still have to buy a different textbook. So I was surprised at how expensive the chart book was. I thought maybe
You just tell
$30.
them to go to, look for the used copies on
Yeah,
Amazon or Powell's
right,
and
because
get it
grammar
there.
doesn't change, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about I am running 3 miles every day? That's a good question. So I am running, that's present progressive, and it's every day, but it's in this time period. So this month, this year, these days. So this is what you're doing in this particular time frame. That's how I would describe it. Does anybody else want to take a stab at that one? I mean, maybe next year I won't run 3 miles every day. There is some overlap between simple present and present progressive because think about this. I work at Fred Meyer. I am working at Fred Meyer.
I
How do
see
you explain?
textbooks describe this as the habitual present.
The I am running?
No, the like I work, I run. If
Yes.
you use simple present for a habitual thing that you do on a regular basis.
Yes, absolutely. But how about that example? I work at Fred Meyer. I am working at Fred Meyer. They're both correct. I think, are all of you, I don't know, maybe you're not all native speakers, but but you're all very high level English speakers. So can you hear the difference? I work at Fred Meyer. I am working at Fred Meyer. How is
It,
that different?
this is the kind of thing that drives my more advanced students batshit.
Yes, correct. I agree with that. But how would you describe that? So I would say I work at Fred Meyer. It's a fact. It's true. It's true all the time. And if you say I am working at Fred Meyer, that implies that right now you're working at Fred Meyer, but maybe in the future it will be different. So, but you're right, that's a small usage error. So there are some situations where there's overlap, and you could legitimately use either one. So when you're going into intermediate and advanced levels, then you have to start to pull them apart. And with low levels, I just want to find clear examples as much as possible to distinguish between habits and things that are in progress now. Okay, I am going to minimize the chat again. So if you see something else, um, I'll try and keep an eye on that. And then we need the forms and the spelling, regular, irregular contractions, and then we need to teach all the different structures. And in English, things like negative sentences and questions are much more difficult than in many languages, especially if you work with Spanish speakers. Then they're really going to, in Spanish, you can just put the word no in and you're done. And in English, it's a little bit more complex. And the same for questions. In fact, in Spanish, you can just say, do you want to go to the store? But you just say it with the rising intonation or the intonation, and then you don't even need to use a helping verb. So it takes a little bit more effort. And then the pronunciation, and then usage. How do you use this? And we were just talking about contexts and uses, distinguishing between simple present and present progressive. So those are just things that you're always thinking about when you're teaching them. And then there's all the other stuff. There's nouns, and nouns have singular and plural forms, which can be challenging. Then we have count and non-count. Like we cannot count rice, one rice, two rices, three rices. We don't count it. But we do count flowers, one flower, two flower, the kind that you smell, not the kind that you cook with. One flower, two flowers, three flowers. And um, you can usually I think you can explain that or give them practice for them to know that. But one thing to know is that in some languages, the count and non-count nouns in that language are not the same. So for example, in French, you can count furniture. In French, you can say one furniture, two furnitures, three furnitures. But in English, we can't count furniture. It's a non-count noun. So that's something that can come up. And then pronouns and possessives. So those are things that they need. And nouns and pronouns are really important because they are the subjects of the sentence. And we just talked about sentence patterns. We are a subject, verb, object language. And then there's also adjectives, adverbs, prepositions. These are also some things that come up that are important to teach. Prepositions, at, in, on, those are always confusing for students. The other ones I think are a little bit more concrete, but students get very confused about the difference between in, on, at in English. And again, part of the reason for that is because it maps differently from their language onto English. They also have concepts of in, on, at, but they use them differently, and it's not completely aligned with English. So that creates a lot of confusion. Oops, I think I just saw that slide. And then there's some other things that are not here on this chart. Articles. Those are actually some of the most difficult things for students to be really confident with and correct with. So we start using them in beginning levels, and even at advanced levels, students are still working on it. So for me, what I do, my own strategy with lower levels is I want students to think about if it's a singular noun that we can count, we need to have an article. And if they can remember that, I feel very happy. And then if the learners are at a level where they can understand, I talk about is new information, the is shared information. And I try not to go too much in depth with it with beginning learners. And then conjunctions. So students will need to know and, but, so, or, and but are pretty easy. But once you start to mix up all of them, then it can get more challenging. And then, of course, subordinate conjunctions like because, when, if, after, etc. So, how should you pack your grammar suitcase? That's a lot of things. You might feel overwhelmed as a teacher. Your students almost certainly feel overwhelmed. Where I work, they give us a curriculum, and there's this long list of things that I need to pack into the class, and it can be overwhelming. So, my personal strategy that I use is I start with the big stuff. I pack in the most important things. It's really important to know the sentence structure, subject, verb. So when they're writing, I want to see sentences that have a subject and have a verb. You know, in some languages, it's okay to drop out the subject. So in Spanish, for example, if the subject is understood, you don't have to actually explicitly say it every time. And so they can start with the verb. It doesn't mean that there's not a subject. Spanish is also a subject verb object language. The subject is there, but it's implicit in our brains. We just are not articulating it. And then I work a lot with verbs and kind of the verb tenses that are appropriate for the level of students. And in order to have our subject verb sentences, we need to also do some work with nouns and pronouns. So just like in this picture, this woman's packing in all the big stuff. And then once you kind of have that in, then you pack in as much other grammar as you can around the bigger items. So for example, if we're practicing be verbs, am, is, are, that's also a great time to work on prepositions. The cup is on the table. The cat is under the table. It's a good time to work on prepositions. So I'm always thinking about what other items can I pack in with the big ones. This image on the right, I wanted a picture of a woman packing a suitcase, and I asked for a picture of a woman packing a suitcase, and I intended to ask for a picture of a woman who was not white packing a suitcase, because when I use pictures with students, I want my students to be able to see themselves in the pictures. Now, I do actually have students who are racially or physically white, so that's okay. But I did want a picture of diversity. So I said, oops. And then I went back and I asked, oops, sorry. So I asked, I used Gemini for this. I said, please change it so that we can see a Hispanic or Asian woman. And I asked it 4 times. And I think it darkened her skin color on her leg, but it did not change. So that's just something interesting about using AI generated images. I'll show you an image later that I have that I also generated with Gemini, and I remembered to ask the first time, show diversity in this image, and then it did, but I could not get it to fix this image. So it's kind of interesting for me. I'm just starting to use AI. I have very mixed feelings about AI, but I'm experimenting and just trying it out. One thing about using it, though, that is kind of amazing and marvelous is if you want to illustrate something for students or give students practice, you can create scripted images. And by scripted, I mean you can tell it what you want to see in this picture. I said I wanted a woman who was going on vacation and she's packing a suitcase and she's already packed the big things and now she's just trying to pack the little things. And that's what it gave me. And if I'd asked for more diverse example in the first place, it probably would have given it to me. It's really interesting, kind of scary. Okay. Anyway, oops, I see some things in the chat. Okay, so somebody said I had the same problem with Gemini.
Yeah,
I think Gemini is better than ChatGPT for images. Is that your experience?
I can't get ChatGPT to do images at all.
Right. So I think if you want images, you can gravitate to Gemini or some other ones. And also, that lady will never fit all the stuff in that suitcase. Yes, for sure. And the other thing that I thought was funny about this picture, she has two straw hats that are identical. Why would you take two identical straw hats on vacation? And also, I would never pack my straw hat in the suitcase. Anyway, okay, so that's a sidebar. All
I do
right,
have a question about AI.
go.
Do any of you know of any AI where you can put in a dialogue? I use ChatGPT to create all my dialogues, where I can put a dialogue in and then the AI will create an image or a photograph to go with that specific dialogue. I was trying to do that last weekend and I couldn't get any of them to do that.
You were trying it with ChatGPT?
I tried it with Gemini, I tried it with ChatGPT, and a few others that I've forgotten about. And none of them were able to do that specific thing.
You wanted an image to complement the dialogue?
Yes, to match up exactly with the dialogue for my beginners. And I couldn't find any of them to do that. And like you said, with Gemini, you have to be super, super specific with your very first font because it does not make improvements with continued iterations.
That's what I learned.
Me too.
I'm just seeing if anybody has an idea on that one. I am not an AI expert, but my best idea is that you would then you would create your dialogue and then just pull out the words and then say, make an image with these words, or then next one, make an image with these words. Break it down for Gemini.
I did do that and I got it closer, but it's still,
Mm,
AI is just not accurate enough yet, I think, for that
yeah,
task.
yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. While we're on the AI, also, I have been doing materials for listening, and we had a lecture on something like using email in school. And then I even forget which one it was. There is a AI that you can say, take this lecture and turn it into a podcast. It turns it into a podcast. And so then your lecture, which is more formal, suddenly it's two people chatting and it creates the audio for you. Just again, it's like, wow. Okay, I think we should get back to yeah. We probably should have an ATW, a workshop just on AI. But anyway, so the other thing to just mention is the use of grammar terms, and less is usually more. Probably you already know that from your own experience working with students. However, some is useful. So, for example, even with very, very beginning students, you have to teach classroom language, and you have to kind of load them up with some vocabulary, some basic sentences, and you're teaching classroom language. And you probably are going to need to teach the word and probably the word sentence. So you're starting even at the beginning with some of the most basic words, and then gradually adding in as you truly need them, but always try and avoid grammar words whenever I can. So, for example, with my intermediate students, I have to teach gerunds and infinitives, or low intermediate, we do some work with gerunds and infinitives. And I don't even like to say gerund because what a stupid word. Why should my students need to put that into their vocabulary set? So I just say ing nouns because that's really direct and they can understand it. So I really try and be very thoughtful about which grammar words I choose to use. And then you probably already know this also. Language learning is a spiral. We start with our beginner students with teaching be sentences. And then we come back around on that again with more complexity, to review, to reinforce, and also to add complexity. So even in my high beginning classes, we would need to know about infinitives. I need to work this weekend. I want to make a cake this weekend. We're already working with infinitives. And then when we go to the next level, we come around again and we make it a little bit more complex and talk about other things along with it. So always part of the process for learning grammar. So we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to shift now from our knowledge base to using the language, and we're going to talk about setting up practice for your students. We're going to talk about this section, setting up practice for your students, and then we'll take a break. And then after the break, we're going to come back and talk more about activities and ways to practice the grammar. So these are just the ideas I want to talk about. So when you are doing grammar instruction, well, any language instruction with your learners, you want to watch your language, your language. You want to model the language that you're teaching, and you want to use authentic language. And there's some exceptions for beginners. For example, if you pick up a reading book for very beginners, first level, they're going to tell almost all the stories are going to be in simple present. And we sometimes tell stories in simple present, but the typical way to tell a story is to use past tense. But our beginning learners haven't learned, they haven't brought past tense on board yet. And so there are some modifications we can make, but our goal overall is to use authentic language. So for example, articles are so hard and so difficult, so we don't want to drop them. We don't want to say, I see cat. We want to say, I see a cat. And even if we're not teaching the learner is still hearing it. And that's really important. And then when we set up practice for our students, we want to prompt students for authentic usage. We want to find contexts and situations that are going to use language in the way it's intended to be used. So for example, here's a picture of The Simpsons. And pictures are powerful for teaching language and for teaching grammar. So typically, if you're going to talk to a native speaker about a picture, they're going to typically use things like there is, there are. There's a guy sleeping on, there's a guy on the sofa, there's a dog, there's a boy, there's a plant. There are pictures on the wall. And then also present continuous. Homer is sleeping, Bart is playing a video game, Lisa is reading, Marge is cooking. That's typically what we would use when we see a picture. But you are the teacher. You're the one who's setting it up, so you just frame it. What did they do yesterday? Oh, well, yesterday, Bart played a video game. Homer slept on the sofa. Oh, that's an irregular past. Lisa read a book. That's another irregular past. So you can frame it. What are they going to do tomorrow? They do this every day. What are they going to do tomorrow? And then you can frame it. So that's for you to think about how can you frame the practice so that they're using language in an authentic way. And then, of course, we need to break it down. I think all of you, or almost all of you, are already tutoring, so I'm sure you know this. We teach A, and then we go on and we teach topic B. And then we want to really put topic A and B together and contrast them. So maybe we teach be verbs, and then we teach action verbs, and then we want to do activities where they're using be verbs and action verbs. Or, you can do this at any level of students. What do you teach first? What do you teach next? And then we put them together and review them. And you can level up and down depending on your learners. You might only need to review A and B. They might already have learned it. You can just review it and then move on to the next one. But you might also have learners who are not really able to do A. They're not able to take it on, and you have to break it down into smaller steps for them. You have to teach part of A, next part of A, and the next part of A. So just always thinking about how am I going to break this down for the learners. And of course, you want to engineer for your students' success. Always want to scaffold, explain. Modeling is very important. Practice is the heart of what we do. In fact, and then debriefing. We need to make sure we debrief so the students know how they did on the practice. And sometimes when we're doing lesson planning, we talk about that model of present, practice, and then present, practice, and now I forgot the third one. But instead of presenting, we can think more about preparing. So we prepare our students for practice. We explain it, we model it, and then we do it. Oops, I'm sorry. And then support. we don't want to give answers, but depending on the level of your students, they might need varying amounts of support, even within one group. So for students who are less confident or need more support, maybe you can write some clues on the board, and the students who need it can turn and look at it, and the students who don't need it don't need to look at it. Repeat and recombine. I remember my grad school teacher saying, one of my grad school professors saying, teachers often underestimate how much practice students need. And that is, I think that's always true. And I always remind myself. I think, though, a lot of times when we are working with students, we really face constraints of time. How much time do we have available? And that's our biggest constraint. So we want to really work in as much practice as we can. Right now, I'm trying to learn Japanese. And so I'm using Pimsleur tapes when I drive to work. And they repeat things over and over and over. And it's actually very helpful. I need all that repetition. So we want to give lots of opportunities for practice, and we want to vary the activities so that students don't get too bored. And then error correction. That came up, somebody emailed me and was asking about that. So the idea of correcting students' errors that they make with grammar, and that's an important thing to think about. And we want to use error correction as a tool, not as a cudgel. So learners expect feedback and they actually need feedback. Without feedback, they can't really progress. They need to know where they're succeeding and where they're not succeeding. But we need to consider the timing of feedback and the learner's ability to benefit. If the learner is upset because they're having problems with their kid or their mother's in the hospital, it's really they don't have the capacity to take on a lot of error correction. So want to get the student at a time when they're open and receptive to it. Also, as a general principle, we want to provide more correction during form-focused activities. So we're going to talk about a lot of activities that are patterned grammar practice. So the students are creating their own information, but it still is very form-focused. And so that's when we want to do the correction. And when you're doing more open-ended activities like conversation, that's a time to back off of the error correction unless it's something important. We want to correct in ways that don't discourage learners. And you can think about what are the strategies for you. So I have big classes, probably bigger than you typically have, I'm guessing. So if I have a class of 20 students, we do some practice and I have students write their sentences on the board. And then we all correct it together, but nobody has their name up there, so they're not identified. So we can do an error correction that's not singling out students. There are also some games you can play to work on error correction, maybe not individual students, but if you collect student errors from the group, or maybe from the same student over time, and then you can play games to detect and correct errors in sentences. And then if you're interested in this topic and you want to think about it more, Amy Grant from Beaverton Literacy Council, she did a self-study unit on error correction. So if you're interested, you can click on the link in this slide and go through that and work on that. I'm going to pause here because this is the end of this segment. And I also know that some of you are thinking about error correction, or you might be thinking about other things in this segment, or just comments or thoughts. So I want to pause and see if you have anything you want to say or ask.
One thing that I do is, like you said, I collect my students' errors and I don't present them like on the day that I've collected them or the weeks I've collected them. I kind of hang on to them a little bit so people forget who wrote what, and then use them to target specific grammar points or to review grammar points that I know they're struggling with. But that delay of using it helps if you're worried about the anonymity for their confidence.
So that's another way to make it anonymous. And then if you're collecting these errors, you could do a Kahoot game like which sentence is correct, or have any of you ever used a grammar auction activity? So grammar, this is for a group. This is not good for if you're doing individual tutoring, but if you have groups and you can put them into 2 teams or 3 teams or 4 teams, you make a list of sentences and some of them are correct and some of them are not correct. And then the group bids for the sentences that they think that either they think it's correct or they think they know how to fix it. And so they bid on it. And then after they buy the sentences, you hand out the sentences. They have time to fix it with their group. And then as a class, you go through all the sentences. And well, so when I do it, I always do it with the money is candy. And so they have to spend their candy to buy the sentences. And then if they are able to successfully correct it when we debrief, then they get their candy back. So that's something that you can do if you have, if you want to focus on error correction with large groups. You can use student sentences for this, or you can just write your own sentences that feature the errors that you know your students are making. Any other thoughts about that? Or ideas, things that you do? Okay. I think this is a good time for us to take a break. So let's come back at 10, let's see, 30, 10:40. Let's come back at 10:40 and then we'll start again. So I'll stop my share. I'm going to turn off the recording briefly. Okay.
So this is the resource part.
Pardon?
I mean, this is the resource part that you sent the link for. Okay.
So we're coming back from our break and we're just going to have another minute before we're all back. But if you come on this page and you scroll down, over here we have grammar references. And here is, I will write out more information so that it's easier to find online. Right.
Oh, good.
I'm making a note right now. And so these are just the names of books. And then these are the names of the AZAR books. So I'll make this more complete so it's easier to find. I'll put in the author names or the series authors' names. And then also I know one of you put in a reference that you really like, and I will also find that and I will add it. I'll probably put it under teacher tutor resources because the ones here on the left are all student books they're all student books, but actually they're very useful to look at to help you kind of organize your thinking about grammar.
Which one do you like best for beginners? I mean, basic beginners.
To use with beginners?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So any of these are good. So all of these, they're all good.
Okay.
They have, sorry, I don't know what that little, okay. So all of these are very well-written books. They all have, like any book in the world, they have their strengths and their weaknesses. But they're all sequenced, relatively well. They all are focusing on the needs of beginners and the kind of language they need in their daily life. If you
Okay.
are working with very low level, I would probably do future or ventures.
Okay.
The first level of, we use English in Action at PCC, but the first level of that series is just on the high side for our beginners.
Okay.
Yeah, Jennifer, 3 of these references, they are very user-friendly. And I used to tutor at PCC and we use the English in Action and Future and Ventures. They're very easy to follow.
Yes. Yes, they're all good series. I like English in Action a lot, except for not for the very, very first level. I've used it, but it's a little bit more difficult, I think.
Okay.
Also, Future and Ventures series, not English in Action, but Future and Ventures also have a literacy workbook. So if you are doing beginning level students who are also literacy students and trying to learn how to read and write, Future and Ventures also has a book in their series for that.
Oh, good.
And then my last comment on these series, as I said, I really do like English in Action for our levels 2 and 3 at PCC. But their reading in the book is not as good. So if you use English in Action, I think you'll end up supplementing reading materials. Future, I haven't really used Ventures, but I have used Future, and Future has better reading at those levels.
Okay.
So like I said, every book has pros and cons. So yeah. And the point, I forget exactly who said they used the Azar chart book. Yes, exactly. You can go online and find it for cheap, but not always. I think when I was thinking about using, I did go look at used copies, and they were also not as cheap as I expected. But sometimes there's a glut of them on the Amazon market, and you can pick them up very cheap. That's the same for these books. Um, the publishing industry, they like to go through editions and bring out new editions every 3 to 4 years, or no longer than 5. The grammar doesn't change, but maybe the images change. But when you're thinking about grammar, older editions are just fine, and they can be really a bargain if you find them at PALS or at Amazon.
Okay.
So, anything else about the grammar references?
Not yet. I just really appreciate you giving the information.
Yeah. And then since we're looking at this right now, why don't we just continue here just for a moment before we go back to the slides? So these grammar references, I should change this to say student grammar references that are student books. Here in the middle column, the teacher tutor resources. The first 2 books are books about tutoring that I really liked. And even though I am a classroom teacher, just looking at these books were very useful for me for thinking about new activities and how to work with very low-level students. And the middle section are books that I didn't know what to call it, but I use these books to think about developing activities. The first one is Grammar Practice Activities. And I don't really use activities directly from that book, but I read her ideas, and that usually gives me light bulbs about ways that I can practice with my students. And then we are going to talk about the next one, True Stories. We're going to talk about that in this next section. Probably many of you know the True Stories series by Sandra Heyer. They've been around for years and years and years, and they're reading books, but I use them a lot for grammar practice, and I'll show you some ways that I do that.
Okay.
And then online resources for tutors. Linda's ESOL, that's Linda Bonder from Beaverton Literacy Council. So I know many of you are from Beaverton Literacy Council. This is correcting learner errors. That's the short thing that I just mentioned to you about error correction. And then if you really want a video and not a book, Everyday Grammar TV from Voice of America, they have around 300 videos explaining grammar concepts. And so that can be kind of interesting. If you're thinking about teaching it, you can watch a video on the same topic, and sometimes it helps kind of get your own mental framework kind of in place. And then the right-hand column, these are internet materials for students. So you have to really screen that most of them. Anything that's crowdsourced, that you have multiple authors, you really need to screen. This first one, Test English, it's actually very good quality. They have about 3 pages of practice that is self-correcting, and then they have a tab that is explanation, and they have charts free and explanations. And so you can use it for your own reference, or you could show it to the students, and the students can use it for their reference. It's very good quality, but it is written by British authors, so you should just watch out. Occasionally they'll use a British vocabulary word that your student, she rented a new flat instead of she rented a new apartment. So you have to watch out. ELC Study Zone is a little bit dry, but it has good explanations for grammar. And then websites such as WordWall, LearnHip, etc. I think Beaverton Literacy Council uses WordWall quite a bit.
I use WordWall.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful, wonderful resource. You can use what's already created. You can create your own. But again, just remember, it's crowdsourced. There's a lot of different authors, and so there's a variable range of quality. Some people are wonderful writers and know what they're doing, and it's great. And some people kind of get some grammar things confused. So, and then again, for video, if you might think about this one, this is also from Voice of America. they have a video series called Let's Learn English, and they have 2 levels, and it's a video series which contextualizes beginning grammar topics into stories with recurring characters. Have any of you ever used that one? Yeah. So sometimes, so if you're working on some kind of grammar topic, it's a nice way to get some contextualized input for the students. And they're really very nice.
Is that on YouTube
Internet.
or internet?
I think let's just here's the link. I think this is just on the VOA website.
Anyway, okay.
Probably you can also find it on YouTube. So that's Anna is the recurring character. So anyway, Anna and her travails. So I can see here lesson 5 and 6 are doing a lot of practice with questions with where. Where are you? Where is the gym? And then lesson 7, now we're doing some present progressive. What are you doing? So you can kind of get an idea of the type of grammar that they're doing in this grammar and vocabulary they're doing in that episode. Anyway, so those are something you could use as an additional resource. Okay. Other things here on the resources. If you have resources, we can add them here. This is our little site, and we can put here whatever we want. So I'll write out the more complete reference information. I'm going to add the information I think of as Martin Parrott as a grammar reference. I'll put that in. Okay. Well, let's go back to our slides. Yeah, let's go back to our slideshow. So this is the best part, I think, my favorite part. It's talking about actual examples and things we can do. And that's really the purpose of this. All the other things that we've been talking about are really helping us think and frame how we are going to do. And then these are examples of activities. I did not include every single type of activity I have ever done in my teaching career. So this is not everything. I tried to give you examples of types of activities that you could develop for your own students. And as we go through this, if you think of an example, please just tell us. It would be great to know. Or if you have a question, please ask. I try to watch the chat, but I don't get a pop-up box unless I have my mouse up at the top like this. So I'll keep checking. And then when we get to the end, we can also, if we have a few minutes left, then we can chat more about your experience, your ideas, your examples. Okay, so I'm going to get my pointer out again just in case. So we're going to talk about structured communicative practice. And I'm going to explain this. I'm going to break it down, but I'm going to think about this in the context of activities that are oriented toward right answers versus activities that are oriented toward right grammar. So when I think about right answers, I think about, exercises like textbook exercises, worksheets, drills. I think of those as right answer practice. So right answer practice is often discrete items that are not part of a bigger context. You have like 8 sentences and students have to fill in the blank. There are predetermined answers. The answers are right or wrong. There's not gray area in between, typically. So thinking about this, what are the pros and cons of using worksheets or exercises or drills? So I am not against exercises, worksheets, and drills, and I myself use them, and they have a place. They are this right answer practice, they are very useful for noticing activities. So here's an example. When I'm introducing simple present and present progressive, and then we look, do the sentences talk about something that happens every day or something that is happening now? And then students look at that and we identify it. And that's a noticing activity. That's all they have to do is just notice. They're very good for form focus activities, especially for new structures. So when you are introducing present progressive, it's good for them just to have practice writing it or saying it, or present perfect when they're doing it. I have been, I have watched. It's just good for getting those forms kind of under their fingers, so to speak. I think they can build confidence, especially for students who are a little bit more insecure about their language. And they're good for self-study. In fact, online interactive practice like WordWall or any of those, Test English, which I said I liked, those are all right answer practice because the computer can't, well, not yet. Eventually AI will tell us, but at the moment, we're doing online practice where we put in the answer and then the computer tells us if it's right or wrong. So it's useful for that, for self-study, for homework. So I do think it's useful, but it's not sufficient. It will not lead to good ability to communicate. And if you overuse it, it can be kind of boring. But also at the same time, you can dress it up to be a little bit more fun. So you could take sentences that are, like exercises from the book that have a blank in them, and you could take those sentences and put them on cards and then give one card to each student, and students can walk around and ask their classmate what the answer is and check that. So it still is an exercise, but it might be more fun if they're standing up and walking around. Or if you put it on Kahoot, that, still is an exercise, but it might be more fun. And when you can make it more fun and more engaging, then of course that engages better memory. So structured communicative activities, on the other hand, I think of those as right grammar practice. So in this type of practice, students need to communicate with others to get information or share ideas, or sometimes not communicate with other people, but they engage with texts and they want to get information or share ideas. So in this case, the answers are not predetermined. So it's up to the students, but we want to give students a lot of experience using specific grammar. We still want to give very high quality grammar practice so that they're practicing the structures and getting a lot of practice. And we're focusing on using the correct grammar, but the right grammar and the right patterns. But there's multiple ways that different students can answer it typically. Oops, I'm sorry, too many clicks. So structured communicative activities are patterned but meaningful repetition. And all of those words are important. I keep clicking on the wrong place. It's patterned. That's important because we're getting them to use the same grammar patterns over and over and over. But they're meaningful because they're saying something. They're choosing what to say with those grammar structures. And we're giving them this repetition. And those are the three things that we want to do to really give them the practice to build the habits with any particular grammar structure. So this kind of practice creates a need to use the grammar to communicate, but the answers are not predictable. That's why it's communication. In some cases, students have the opportunity for creative and personal language and sometimes funny answers. And that's always engaging, but it's in a controlled and supported way. There's lots of repetition, but the goal is to make it meaningful repetition. And then this is for those of you who work with low-level students, beginning-level students. It's really important to remember, even before students completely understand the grammar, they can start using the grammar. They can start using patterned language to communicate. So remember, we really want to back off on grammar words when we're working with our beginners. So we might want to teach them the be verb, am, is, are, but maybe we don't even want to say be verb at this point, but we do a lot of practice. I am a student. I am a mother. I am a sister. So that we're repeating I am, I am, I am. And then we have she is a mother. She is a student. She is a sister. So we're repeating the same structures over and over, and we're communicating, we're describing people without even using the grammar words. So that's important to start with those kind of patterns, when they are beginners. So we're going to look at examples of different types of communicative activities. This is not every activity I've ever known in my life, but I've chosen some, and we're going to look at three big groups. Dressing up pattern drills, parent group activities, and mixers. Dressing up pattern drills and parent group activities. If you are doing one-on-one tutoring, you can probably use most or all of these activities. Mixers are harder to do with just one-on-one, but there might be some ways to adapt them for a one-on-one setting. The other thing is, I know at least one of you is tutoring on Zoom. Some of the activities are possible but difficult to adapt for Zoom, so you'll have to think about that. So the first one, so pattern drills. So circle games. Have you ever gone to like a conference or a meeting and you have to go around, my name is Jennifer, and then next person, her name is Jennifer, my name is Tom. You go around the circle and you have to remember the person before you. Well, okay, it's a little bit dull, but it actually can be very good grammar practice. So I often do this when we're practicing third person singular with verbs. So I'm Jennifer. I love chocolate. And the next person, I'm Sarah. I love my children. Jennifer loves chocolate. So loves, and then we're going all the way around the circle. The 4 students, the 5 students, if I have 20 students, I break them into 2 groups. That's too many. Anyway, but they're going through and over and over, they're saying she loves, he loves, and then the students are listening to each other. So if they forget the S, so maybe I prompt at the beginning, loves, and then pretty soon the students are listening and the students are doing the prompting for their classmates. And then you can do it with the negatives, which are even harder. I'm Jennifer. I don't like snakes. I'm Sarah. I don't like traffic. Jennifer doesn't like snakes, so that we're practicing that over and over. Those are really hard to kind of get under the skin and internalize. In fact, research shows that that third person S, she loves, he loves, it's actually a very late natural acquisition. It's not natural. It comes much later. So when I'm working with, I do this a lot with, I would do this activity with beginners and high beginners. And I really want to practice it. I want to do these pattern drills so they have the experience and maybe they have some cognitive knowledge, but I know that that might be a late acquisition for students to produce naturally, and that's okay. But I want to give them that practice so that it's in there. She loves, he loves. Another thing that you can do, it's not exactly a pattern drill, but we can do memory games. So this is Vincent van Gogh's bedroom. And so I'll show it to students. I'll say, look at this picture, talk to your partner about this picture. And, make sure, well, I'm sure they would know the vocabulary. And if they don't, I'll tell them, mirror or chair or hook or bed or blanket. And then I take it away. I don't tell them I'm going to take it away. I'm surprised. I'm going to take it away. And then I say, can you write sentences about things that you see in the room and that are not in the room? And we use this for there is, there are practice. Also the picture of the suitcase, same thing, take it away. And then they have to write sentences. There is a window. There are 2 chairs. There is a door. Oh, no, there are 2 doors. There isn't a cat. And usually I give them some prompts. I'll put like cat, door, window, blanket, and then they have to write sentences about it. And so it's a memory game. But they're working with their partner, they're talking, they're negotiating. But they're still using there is, there are, there isn't, there aren't, over and over. Here's my other AI generated image. So I remembered say a group of diverse people in a doctor's office. And I did make some corrections. It was kind of interesting to hear your experience with Gemini, because when I did it the first time, I did say different ages. So it gave me a baby and it gave me an older man. But then I said, please add toys. And so then it did recreate it with toys, but then I thought that's so sad to have toys and no kid playing. So I said, please add a child playing with the toy. And then it did. So for this kind of activity, I got this idea from Penny who writes books, lots of books. And this is a grammar practice activity that she had. And what you do is you set a timer maybe for 2 minutes. And so the student and their partner, they try and write as many sentences as possible about this picture. And then if you want to really focus on grammar, you can ask them, what are the people doing? And then they write as many sentences as they can to describe what people are doing. Or you could do there is, there are. Um, Tell us what there is in this picture. Tell us what there isn't in this picture. And they write as many as they can. And then you can debrief it. And the goal is fluency. And you're just trying to use the structure, write as many as you can. And then you could have each group write one sentence on the board and use that for correction and debriefing. Or another way to extend this activity is give a second picture. Maybe instead of a doctor's office, now we're in a park and there's people doing different activities in the park. And then they can, this time with the timer, they try to write more sentences. So then they're not competing with other groups, they're competing with themselves. Can they write more sentences than last time? And again, you, the teacher, frame it. What do you want? You could just say, write sentences about the picture, or you can frame it for them. What are they doing? Or write sentences with there is, there are, and how many can you write? So we're going to talk about some different kinds of pair activities. And on this page, it has information gap activities. If you're on Zoom, you can maybe do this, but it takes a little bit more effort to set it up, like maybe emailing different students in the group or doing private text to different people in the group. So it's a little bit trickier. But an information gap activity, you will have two sets of information that one partner A has one and partner B has the other. So this example that's here on this slide is a picture difference, which is the third one on the list. So you can see that they are doing different things. And so this is good oral practice for present progressive. In my picture, the man is looking at his phone. And in my picture, the man is sleeping on the left. You can teach language on the left, on the right. So in my picture, the mom is drinking tea. In my picture, the mom is hugging the daughter. So over and over with present progressive. With schedules, you can practice time at 9 o'clock, at 11:20, at in the afternoon, in the morning, and they each have a different schedule, and then they have to fill in the information from the other person's schedules. And you can do the same thing with maps. Each person has a map, but there are some blank spaces, and they have to ask the other student, and then you're practicing prepositions and locations. Again, for pair or group activities, conversation cards. These examples are from a level 1 class, and you can also see how the one on the left is leveled down for a lower level student because every question is are you, with adjectives. Are you married? Are you tired? Are you happy? Are you hungry? And then the other partner has to say yes, I am, no, I'm not. So to practice short answers with questions. And then on the other side, you can see it's just a slightly higher because now we're doing are and is. So you can kind of level it for what you want your students to be practicing. And again, we're repeating the pattern over and over, but it still is communicative because depending on your partner, they might say, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. So it's real communication, even though we're trying to get these patterned questions and patterned answers. And then conversation grids. Do you use conversation grids with your students? Yeah. And this is adaptable from very beginner up into intermediate or even advanced. And so the idea is you're asking all the people in your group, you're asking the same question pattern over and over. Like on the right, this is an there is, there are practice. Is there a sink in your house? Are there lamps in your house? Is there a dining room? Yes, there is. No, there isn't. The one on the left is even lower. We're working on action verbs. On weekends, do you drink coffee? On weekends, do you check email? On weekends, do you sleep late? And here, this example of the grid here on the left, it has a lot of support. Well, also the one on the right. But this one has a lot of support. Really, you could just read it. You don't even have to think it. So what you probably want to do is, if you feel like your learners have the capacity, you want to take the question off of the card. So you model it and remind students, do you, and then they have to practice it without just reading it. And then what you can do for the debrief, after they've done the talking, you can ask them to choose one classmate and write a sentence about one person on the board. Or if you're working one-on-one, you and the student can do this together, and then you can ask the student one-on-one to write 3 sentences about the information that he or she learned. Ellie has this type of activity for intermediate and advanced learners. I use them all the time when I taught in person. Yeah, Ellie is an online site. I believe it's subscription, has tons of materials. And I know a lot of tutors subscribe to Ellie because it's very useful just so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody else has already written the materials for you. And they use that as an alternative to a textbook. Gina, did you use that as an alternative to a textbook or as a supplement?
I used it as a supplement, and my students really, really like the grammar study tip pages, which is just, the grammar rules in an easy, accessible form. And so I
Yeah,
would always print those off for them to keep as reference when they did their homework.
that's wonderful.
But yeah, Ellie is great for grammar.
It's great for grammar. That's true. And then, Gina, when you were using it, did you have a subscription?
Yes, I've had a subscription for years, and Beaverton Literacy also has a subscription.
So if you have access to it, it's a wonderful resource. It's really good. It's well done. If you don't have a subscription, you could do some of the same things with that Test English website that I showed you because they also have the grammar rules and tips that you could show or print. So that would be an alternative to Ellie, but Ellie is probably more comprehensive, just a little bit bigger collection. Ellie also has other kinds of activities in addition to grammar. And so I know some students have students do speaking practice on Ellie. And then Ellie feeds back some general kinds of encouraging, gives some general encouraging feedback.
And for people who don't have a subscription, just last week I discovered that a lot of the Ellie videos are on YouTube, which you can access for free.
Oh, that's
I
nice.
did not know until I was researching present progressive videos, and they threw Ellie ones at me. I was on YouTube, and I was not logged into my account or anything like that, so it was free.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So I'll put that on our resource list so that you don't have to remember it. You can just come back and look at that. Okay. Yeah. Anything else here
Excuse
before?
me.
Yeah.
What was the name of the test website? You said test something has
Test English.
test English. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, hold on. Oops. I'm just going to swing back here, back to the resources. So under Internet Materials, it's linked right here, Test
Oh,
English.
good. Okay.
And then I will add Ellie to this list so that you can also see that because that's also a great resource.
Okay.
We had a free subscription for a while and I was using it for a little while, but then I didn't have a free subscription anymore, so I stopped using it. Anyway, okay. Okay, so here's another one, some paragroup activities using question games. And this is one that can adapt anytime that you're using a grammar structure where you need to teach the question form. This is really fun. So for example, let's see, we want to practice yes or no questions with be verbs. Then, and I am the answerer, and maybe you are the askers. You could say, "Are you married?" And then I will say yes, and I would put an X under yes. And then you say, Are you happy today? And I'd be like, I'm not sure. And so we could put an X over here under question mark. Um, are you a mother? Yes. Are you a nurse? No. Okay, so the other students are asking the same grammar structure over and over, but it's very communicative because they're asking me questions. And usually what we do is we give them a goal. I say, okay, I want you to ask questions that you think the answer will be yes. Are you a teacher? Yes. Are you a mother? Yes. Are you hungry? And then I say no. And then, oh no. And so then we go to the bottom and then we see how many did we get at least 7 yes questions, yes answers. And then we switch it. Now, please ask questions that you think the answer will be no. And I model it once so they understand it. And then I have students, I always have a student answer so that students are practicing answers also. So that it becomes a student activity. And that's a lot of fun. And you can do that for many levels. You could do present perfect. Have you ever visited New York City? Have you ever run in the rain? Have you ever ridden a motorcycle? So you can do it over and over. And then students have a lot of fun with that one, actually. And then I love, I hate. Have you ever done, I don't know, some of you might know this activity. It's where, like I'm going on a picnic and I'm going to take certain things. Have you ever done that one? And then there's a hidden rule. And so, for example, with this one, I make it simple. I don't talk about my aunt coming to visit or going on a picnic. So I just say, I love, I hate. And I am going to love anything that is red, but I don't say that. And so then they say, do you love pizza? Yes, because pizza is tomato sauce. Yes, I do. Do you love your husband? No, I hate him. And then everybody's laughing. They think that's hysterical. Do you love? And so the idea is that they ask questions and I say yes and no, and then they're eventually trying to find the hidden rule. I love things that are round. I love things that are blue. I love things that are um, smaller than that can fit under a table. Well, that would be too hard. That'd be obscure. But things that there's a clear rule and they have to ask questions until they can find the rule. And I've used that with beginning students, and we've had lots of fun with that one. And of course, once you model it as the teacher, you could then have a student be the person who gives the answers. And I'm going to say there's a lot of other question games, and they're usually very fun. Another one that I don't have here is make them say it. So one student has the answers, and then each student has different answers, and they have to try and get the other person to say the answer. So for example, maybe I have, what's a good example? Washington, D.C. And I want to get them to say Washington, D.C. So I might say, I can ask any question. What is the capital of the U.S.? Washington, D.C. Then maybe my next one is green. So I could say, what color is a watermelon? And then I want them to say green. And then my next prompt is at night. And I'll say, um, when do the stars come out at night? I mean, those are not, I would think through my prompts more carefully if I was giving them to students, but that's the idea. They have prompts and then they try to ask questions so this other student will say the answer. And then I'm sure many, many, many of you have used Find Someone Who activities. And you can change that for all kinds of grammar structures. And you can give different levels of support. So for this one on the left, we're practicing past tense verbs and making questions with past tense. And so here, who ate pizza yesterday? So there's the irregular, this is with irregular verbs. Who ate pizza yesterday? And then the student has to remember, they have to change, for questions, they have to change ate to did you eat? Did you eat pizza yesterday? And then they want to write people who said yes. Did you eat pizza yesterday? Did you eat pizza yesterday? And then after we're done, we debrief. We go, who ate pizza yesterday? So that we're going back to that irregular form. And then here's one with can you? Yes, I can. No, I can't. And I am doing present perfect with intermediate students right now. And so we started, last week we were really working on just form, getting them to produce sentences with the form. So we did a find someone who with present perfect. Have you ever visited New York? Have you ever seen the sunrise? Have you ever whatever? And then next week, we're going to expand that and we're going to start contrasting present perfect with simple past. Have you ever visited New York? And if they say yes, then the students have to ask a follow-up question. When did you go? So then you have to switch into simple past to ask for specific details about the past. So it's another way to use a find someone who, where there's follow-up questions. This is kind of a similar idea to the find someone who. It's a one-question survey. So with lower learners, I have them start with the sentence first and then transform it into a question. If you have higher learners, you can start directly with the question. And you could do, this one is set up for present tense. You could do it with past tense. You can do it with modals. So I make one question and then I go and ask as many people as possible the same question. And then, and then I record their name and did they say yes or no? And then usually since I'm in big classes and we have fun, we say, who has the most yes answers? And then they read us their question. Who has the most no answers? And they read us their question. And the person who has the most always gets candy because they were very busy talking. And that's the goal. So that they're asking the same question over and over, repeating the grammar over and over, but it's meaningful because the answers are going to be different. This would be hard to do in a one-on-one setting. Cocktail cards, probably some of you have used these. They do have some different names, but the idea of a cocktail card is you have a card, and on the front side you have a prompt or a question, and then to make them really effective on the back, you write the answer. Sometimes we use cocktail cards just for conversation, and it's not about the grammar, it's just about fluency and talking. But when we want to use it for grammar, what we do is we write the answers on the back so that the student who has the card shows the front to their partner or to their classmate and says, what did you eat for breakfast? And they are listening. Does the partner say, I ate or I didn't eat? And so then that way, there's two people and the one person can correct the other person. And then after they do their cards, then they change cards and find a new partner so that they are getting practice. This one is, what did you eat for breakfast? When did you get up? What time did you leave the house? So there's a lot of questions and they're getting practice over and over with the same structures. And they're also getting feedback and correction from their partner. And that's the same thing going on here with Lionel Messi. We were practicing in a level 1 class, what's his name or what's her name? So the student needs to remember when they ask the question, they need to remember, is it his or her name? They have to remember man or woman. And then they ask, there's nothing written on the front. They just have to remember, what's his name? Or if it's Serena Williams, they say, what's her name? And then on the back, they can see the answer. His name is Lionel Messi. And again, same thing up here. Here's practicing how many. And there's so many things you can do with cocktail cards. You can run it up and down the levels. And also it's great for vocabulary practice as well. If you're teaching one-on-one, you can't have students walking around the class talking to lots of different students, but maybe you could think of it like a deck of cards and each one of you takes turn drawing the card and asking the other person. So the teacher asks the student and then corrects, and then the student draws and asks the teacher, and of course the student can still see the answer when they listen to the teacher. And you could even maybe sometimes give correct answers and sometimes give wrong answers, and the student can correct you. And then this is also a mixer, so a mixer where they get up and walk around, and it's a bingo card, human bingo card. And can you look at this and can you identify the grammar topics that we were practicing? So students had to form questions to ask their classmates? And what are we practicing with the questions? Okay. It's not a test. You don't have to have the answer. So in our class, we had been practicing using be verbs, M is R, and we had been practicing using action verbs. So in this, you have to make some questions with be verbs and some questions with have. So we've already been practicing this, and now this is a speaking activity. Do you have lipstick? Do you have car keys? Do you have a library card? Do you have single? Oh, no, wait, no, you can't say that. Are you single? How about grandparent? That's interesting because you could say, do you have a grandparent? Or you could say, are you a grandparent? That one works both ways. But we can't say, are you a cell phone? So they have to decide, should I use are you or should I use do you have? And remember, I just gave this to you cold and you're looking at this going, what? But remember, when you're in a classroom, remember we're engineering for success. So we always set it up before we launch the students into the activity. We give them the information they need to do the activity. We model it. So I would always model it with maybe one student first or a volunteer in the room first, and then I would ask the students to get up and do it. So those were kind of like typical speaking activities, mingling, mixing, speaking. And then you can also add in writing by debriefing and asking students to write some sentences on their paper if it's just you and one student, or you can ask them to write it on the board if it's a group. And that way you can debrief it. Students can't write all of their sentences from this, but they could write, or all their sentences, but they could write one sentence. I might say choose one person and write a sentence about one person. And that way it's a debrief and it's also a chance for a little bit of error correction. Okay, so we're going to go to the next section, which is talking about text-based grammar practice. Before we go to that section, just want to see if you have any comments or questions in this section before we kind of move into a different type of activity.
I have a question, Jennifer. Could we use this group activity in conversation groups when
Yeah.
they're doing conversation class?
This activity can work anytime you have a group of students.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
For
this
example,
activity, yeah, go ahead.
For example, when we do, in my understanding, we do conversation class, just throw a theme or topic and talk about it. And let's see what they can come up with, which sentences. But this is good because it's a starter, I believe, this group activity.
So maybe some cocktail cards.
Mm-hmm.
This mixer, this kind of implies a slightly larger group because your goal is to get a row of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might not have enough in a conversation group, depending on how big your conversation group is. But you could do any of these.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, this find someone who, you could maybe orient it toward the vocabulary that you want to use in your conversation topics
Mm-hmm.
and use it as a warm-up kind of
Yes.
opener. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Yeah. There's a lot of ways. One reason I like these, apart from, I keep saying we're repeating, it's patterned, but also they can be adapted to so many different kinds of students, different levels, different grammar topics. They're very, very flexible, and that's one of the reasons they're so valuable as tools in your, teacher's toolbox. There's my mouse. Okay. I want to talk just a little bit about some text-based grammar practice. So we went through a section where we were thinking a lot about communicative grammar practice where students are engaging with other people. Maybe you, the tutor, maybe other students in their class. And in this section, we're going to think about students engaging with a text. And that does not excluding talking or working with a partner. Whenever I have a group of students, I always say, who's your partner? Who's your partner? When they're in class, I want them to work with the students, so there's also a speaking component. And when they're at home, they can work by themselves. So I know my students get tired of, who's your partner? Who's your partner? They get tired of me saying that, but so we're going to talk about adding a grammar component to a reading. Now, for those of you who went through our basic tutor training workshop, you might remember that when we talked about reading, we talked about looking at the reading as a whole and thinking about the meaning in the reading. And then we could pull out some aspect of the reading. It could be pronunciation, it could be vocabulary, it could be grammar. And we focus on one part of the reading, one part, a language focus, and then we go back to a bigger picture again. So in this case, we are going to think about adding a grammar component to reading, not pronunciation, not vocabulary. So I have a variety of activities just to show you for examples. So on this page, we're thinking about using a reading as a model. And I have two examples from Very Easy True Stories by Sandra Heyer. She has some of the best books out there. She has written them as reading books, but she also follows a whole part whole structure. So you could get one of her books, you could do the reading, you could do her. Often she has something with pronunciation or phonics, and then she might have a little grammar or a vocabulary activity, and then she'll have some kind of what's the word? Some kind of wrap-up activity. So she already is doing that, but I often take her readings and then use it for my own purposes. And a lot of other teachers I know do too. These are very popular books in our office. So Mary Walks Home, if you've ever used this book, you might remember Mary Walks Home. It talks about an unusual daily routine. I'll let you come through and click this link later if you want to. I'll show you the next one. But it's talking about an older woman who walks to work every day. And it's a little bit unusual. And it's all about her habits. So it's just lots of simple present verbs. So we might read the story. And by the way, in Very Easy True Stories, first they start with picture panels, and then they have it written in paragraph format. So you can use either or both. And when we read it, then after we're done with that, we can have students identify the simple present verbs. Find all the verbs, and then they can underline them or highlight them. And then after we have identified it, this is what she does every day. And then you can ask students to write about what do you do every day. So it becomes a model for the student's own writing. And this is also, the second one is also a model activity. So here's another one from the same book called Neighbors. I believe that's the name. Yeah, Neighbors. And remember, this book, they have picture panels first, but I just made a photocopy of the page here with the reading. And her books are called True Stories because she has found true stories about real people, and then she has adapted them into a simpler format for English learners. So this is a true story, and these are the true people right there. So that's often very motivating for students. A lot of times we see the story first and I say, this is true story. And then like students are like, what? Wow. In this book, I think it's the same book. There's another one at the end of the book where the man rents a new apartment and then he goes out for lunch. And then when he finishes lunch, he can't find his apartment. He's in a big city with all these big high rises and he can't find his apartment. This is a true story. And took him about a month to locate his apartment. It's a crazy, crazy story. So that's really fun and engaging for students. And then you can do, the part practice. So this is a story about Jack and Ann are married. They are not happy together. Why not? They are very different. Jack smokes. Ann doesn't smoke. Jack likes to watch baseball. Ann doesn't like baseball. So you can see right here we have simple present and simple present negative, and we're contrasting them. And lots of examples. We could ask students to find the examples. And then Anne sees the house next door is for sale and she buys it and she moves in. Now Anne lives next to Jack. And now we have some modals with can ability. Jack can watch baseball. Jack can smoke. He can snore. In her house, Anne can listen to loud music. She can sleep. So it's a cute little story. It's true. And then after you read the story, you could have students retell it, just, retell it, or they could match the verbs with the sentences. And then after they've done some practice, then they can write sentences about themselves. What do they like? Or what does their husband like? Or what can they do? So they use it for models. Students really like that story, by the way. It's hysterical. This is text engagement activities to practice questions, and these are just two that I made. This one about Tiger Woods is a little bit outdated because I wrote it about, 10 or 12 years ago, but I'm just going to show it to you as an example of question using reading and reading to create question practice for students. So here, this is all vocabulary we've been practicing in level 1. They hopefully by now know all this vocabulary because we've been practicing. And then here's a picture of Tiger Woods. And some of the students might know who he is and some might not, but they have to write 5 questions about this man. What is his name? Is he happy? Is he lazy? Is he single? Is he rich? They can make their own questions. And then after they write questions, then they read the story about Tiger Woods. And after they read the story about Tiger Woods, then they go back and they answer their own questions. What is his name? Tiger. Is he married? No, he's divorced. Is he rich? Yes. So they answer their own, they've created the questions, they've read it, and now they're answering it. But so here's a lot of practice. It's very patterned. Is he a student? Is he busy? Is he divorced? Is he married? So they're practicing the question structure over and over. The Selena one is also similar, but it's a little slightly higher level because we're doing yes, no, and WH questions with past tense verbs. More text engagement. This one is an example of problem solving. And again, here we are, easy, true stories. She has lots of great stories where the people in the story have a problem. And so what you can do is cut off the solution and then ask students to think about the solution. So I'm going to show you this story just as an example. I've done this with a number of stories that she has. It's really fun. And it's really engaging for students. I actually adapted her story because her story is longer and I just wanted a short synopsis of the story. So John is 52 years old. He is a house painter. He is not married. Every day he comes home from work and eats dinner alone. He watches TV alone. At 11 o'clock he goes to bed alone. John isn't happy. He has a good job and a nice house, but he doesn't have love. He wants a wife. So then they talk to their group, what do you think John might do? John is trying to find an answer. What do you think he might do? And then the group can write some ideas. He might ask his friend. He might go to a bar. We don't know. What do you think? And then after we generate some, then look at your ideas. What do you think John should do? Should John go to a bar? John should look online. What do you think he shouldn't do? So we're practicing the modals might and we're practicing should for advice. So might for possibility and should for advice. And then you read the conclusion, which I'm going to tell you just so you know. John is a house painter, so he has a van. So on the side of this is a true story, don't forget. So on the side of the van, he wrote, wife wanted, please, send letter. And he gave his address. And the happy ending of the story is he met somebody named Bobby who was divorced and they fell in love and now they're happy. And now John changed his van back to white. Same kind of idea with predictions, an expensive vacation. You read the first part of the story and these two guys, they have a problem. And then this time instead of advice, you could ask them to make a prediction. If you're working with will and going to forms of the future, make a prediction, write your prediction, and then you read the conclusion. Did the students correctly predict the outcome? You can come back and look later if you want to see the story. And then we can also think of images and videos as a type of text. And so these are 2 activities using Mr. Bean, and the students love Mr. Bean. It's fun and funny. So here's one activity where we have getting up late for the dentist. So first, before we watch the video, it's a long video, so we have to watch 3.5 minutes. So I gave him a handout. with vocabulary for the things that we're going to see in the video, so they are familiar with all the words. And then we watch the video, and then they have to write sentences. In the video, what did he do? What didn't he do? And so they write sentences, and they write at least 2 negative sentences. He brushed his teeth. He put on his clothes. He didn't turn off the light. Yeah, that kind of stuff. All right. And that is another one. This is a little bit higher level where we're using complex sentences. So that'll be high beginning or low intermediate. Okay, we have about 7 minutes. Oh, and don't forget to pre-teach vocabulary. And that's what I did on this handout here. I'm going to skip over listening and dictation just to say there are some dictation activities. Well, I'll say briefly, there are some dictation activities that you could use. Nice thing is if you have a big group, you can do it with any size of group. All students are equally engaged at the same time. One of you was asking about fossilization, and I was like trying to brainstorm some ideas about working on fossilization. This one right here, messenger dictation, that could be a good activity for a student who's fossilized. If you write some sentences using the structure that they are stumbling over, and then you write it. It depends on how many people you have. If you have a big group, you have to have multiple copies. But let's say you have like 6 people in the group, and you put the sentences on the wall on the far side of the classroom, and then they work in pairs, and one student goes over and reads the sentence, and then they have to come back and dictate it to their partner. Some people call this running dictation, so probably some of you have done this, messenger dictation or running dictation. That could be good for somebody who's fossilizing because they see the correct thing and then they have to remember the correct form long enough to tell their partner. And then, the teacher is kind of looking over his shoulder, say, oh, that's not quite right. Check again, go back. And so there's some correction built in there. And then grammar dictation is a little bit more extended form of dictations where you give a story and then students try to recreate the story. So again, working with the grammar structures. Here's this family. Some of you, if you use true stories, you might remember the story about the pet penguin who goes shopping for the family. Another true story. So, and then this is instructions on how to do it. So students take notes and then they make a story about it using the grammar. So this would be a lot of simple present verbs. What do you think? So I'm just going to pause. We have about 5 minutes. I just want to see if you have more ideas, more, suggestions, references, or activities you've used, or questions about the ones I showed you.
I have, first of all, thank you so much. I like the idea that you said practice with your underestimating the.
Hemi, you're a bit faint. I don't know if you can lean in on your microphone just a bit.
Sorry about that.
Better.
I like your professor's idea for, on practice, repeat, because it's easy to forget what we learned today. And I like all of the materials you shared. And I personally think that the story, like watching a story and filling the blanks, it's very productive because people like to be stimulated and motivated, especially in adults, and some of them are coming in a class tired. And
Yes.
English is my 3rd language, even though I started learning English ever since I was a kindergarten. So I totally relate to them, and I liked your ideas of practicing, showing the pictures, reading them true stories. It stimulates the brain. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Stimulates the brain, which stimulates better memory. And some of the other ones, which were not stories and pictures, you're getting them standing up and moving around. So students who are coming in tired, that's also very useful to get them up and moving around. So Hemi is working on English as her 3rd language, And for those of you who English is a first language, you already have all the grammar in your head. You really basically know what's right and what's wrong already. It's just a matter of how to explain it. But people who are non-native speakers of English who teach English, they have an added advantage because they also remember what it's like to learn that new language. And that gives them a special bond with the students that they can use. Any questions that you have or any activities that you'd like to share?
As you were talking, Jennifer, you reminded me of an activity that I used to do when I taught in person that my students loved. And
Oh,
coming off of that, where you're collecting student sentences that have errors in them and then
mm-hmm.
delaying to use them. And so I used to start, my students all worked. I taught at night. My students, they came in
Mm-hmm.
exhausted.
Yeah.
And so I would always start class with an activity that got them up out of their seat and kind of waking up. And so I created a relay race. So I would write
Oh,
their sentences from past classes on the board, divide them up into 2 or 3 teams, and they would wait in line just like in grade school relay races, and one goes up and corrects what they can find, runs back to their team, hands them the dry erase, the next person in line the dry erase marker. They go up, correct what they can, and the team that gets their sentences corrected first are the winners. And I would always encourage the teams that the people that English is hard for go first, and the people that English is easy for go last. But they loved that, and it really did help wake them up both physically and mentally for night classes.
yeah, that's a great idea. Previously collected. That's a wonderful idea.
And I used it mostly for grammar review. So it
Yeah,
was all things they already knew.
yeah. I've done some variations on relay races with grammar where I say write a positive sentence in present tense, write a negative sentence in present tense, write a positive sentence in past tense, write a negative sentence in past tense. And they work in groups. They write one and they come up and get it checked. And the groups want to see which group can get all the kinds of sentences correct first. So again, it's kind of a race where they're doing it and then they race up to check it with me. Yeah. But going up to the board is also fun too. Okay, well, we are at the end of the time, and I need the last minute because I'd like to ask you to fill out our class evaluation form. And I'm going to grab the link and I'm going to put it in the chat. The link is also here on our resource page, which I will start filling out with our group information after we finish. But I would like to ask you to do the eval now if you are able while it's fresh in your mind. So I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to come back and put it in the chat. It should open for you. Okay, maybe somebody could just check the link to make sure that link is working for us. Yeah,
It
okay.
works.
Excellent, excellent. So if you can do it now, that would be great. If you need to do it later, that's okay. But we do hope you will fill it out because believe me, the members of our board read all the responses and think carefully about them, how to improve what we offer and how we offer it. So I'm going to say goodbye to you. And if you have a question, stick around and ask me. I'm happy to stay and talk to you, but just want to release the people who are ready to go. So I'm going to say thank you and goodbye. It's really fun.
Thank you.
Bye. If you have a question, feel free to stay on. Carolyn, you're muted. Thanks, Jeanette. Carolyn, I don't know if you're talking to me, but you are muted. If you're talking to someone in your house, you're good. If you're talking to me, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I was working with the link. Thank you very much for all your help. I really
You're so
appreciate it.
welcome. Yeah, you're so welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hillary, do you have any questions?
Oh, sorry, no, I was just trying to finish up the survey
Oh,
as
thank
quickly as
you.
I
Thank
could.
you.
I'll hop
Thank
off.
you. The board thanks you. They really, really look at these evaluations.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, oh, no, it did save it. Okay. I'll hop off.
Okay. Bye, Hillary.